Hi, good evening everyone, and welcome back to our latest last lap revision video. Today Ananya and I are both going to take this essential video on the Israel-Palestine conflict. As you all know, this is a vitally important topic. Its tendrils go out into so many other topics. And if you just look at the history of CLAT, in the new pattern, this topic has already been asked 2 times. Okay. We think at least that it's a likely topic for this year as well. So it's very important to cover this topic in great detail. Okay. So today we have the entire history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. So we go through it from the basics, from history, through the First World War, the beginning of Zionism, through the partition plan, what is the two-state solution, the whole series of the Arab-Israeli wars, the latest Abraham Accords, and finally ending with the 2023 invasion of Gaza by Israel, which followed the October 7th attack by Hamas. We ultimately end today's class on the peace plan proposed by Trump and the sort of tentative ceasefire that's taken place under it. So we're going to cover all of these topics, the basics of all of these organizations and everything in between. So I hope you're ready with your pens and papers or your devices for your notes. Please do pay attention and let's make a start. Okay. All right. So the first slide we have here is right from the beginning. So we begin with Palestine. So Palestine as a word, some form of this word was first described by the Greek person Herodotus. Okay, this is way back in the 5th century BCE. BCE is before Christ, right? So, or in the modern format, BCE stands for before Common Era, right? So it was thought that BC and AD were too Christianized, and so Anno Domini became Common Era, and before Christ became before Common Era. Okay, so Herodotus is the first time we see some close variation of the word Palestine in the 5th century BCE. Okay, now for our purposes, the modern history of the conflict begins around the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, so basically the territory of what is modern day Palestine and Israel used to be under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, now if you see here, we've given you a basic idea that at the start of the 20th century, which is about the 1900s, the Jewish population in Palestine was quite a bit less than 10%. Okay, it was around 5 or 6%, so far as we have been able to assert. Okay, now what happens is that in the First World War, the Ottoman Empire is part of the Central Powers. Okay, what were the Central Powers? Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. Please keep an idea about this because, as you know, this year is also the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, as well as the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. Okay, so from that perspective, a little bit of history on the First World War is also vital. So the Ottoman Empire was one of the central powers against the Allies, right? Who were the Allies? Mainly UK, France, and Russia. There were, of course, other countries involved on almost every side. But this is the long and short of it. Okay. Now, as you know, the central powers lost the war. Okay. How we reach this, we'll see in one of the next slides, which basically gives the history of the British and French and other involvement in the region. Okay. Now, just to give you a bit of background before we get into the core history of the conflict, of course, the area which is now Israel and Palestine is very important in all 3 Abrahamic Semitic religions. What are these 3? These are Christianity, Islam, as well as Judaism. Okay, all 3 are known as Abrahamic religions. All 3 can also be called Semitic religions. Okay, so this category you should keep in mind. As you all know, there are many commonalities in the stories, right? Moses becomes Musa, Abraham becomes Ibrahim, Cain and Abel become Kabil and Habil, and so on and so forth, right? Similarly, or Jesus Christ himself becomes Isa Masih, right? So there is great commonality in the origin stories of all these three Abrahamic or Semitic religions, and all of the history is sort of focused or centered on this region, which is today Israel and Palestine. The broader region was called the Levant. Okay, so that's the broad region we are talking about. Now, let's do a little bit about the basics of Judaism and Islam. So, as I've written, Judaism and Islam are both Abrahamic, Semitic, and monotheistic religions. What is monotheism? One God, right? So, Christianity, Islam, Judaism are all monotheistic religions. On the other hand, religions like Hinduism are considered polytheistic religions, meaning there are multiple gods which are recognized. Okay. Now, in Judaism, what is the core book, right? In Indian languages, these three faiths are also called Kitabiya faiths, because Christianity, Islam, as well as Judaism are centered on one core revealed work, right? So, in the case of Judaism, it is called the Hebrew Bible, which is also called the Tanakh. Sometimes it is also referred to as the Mikra, and it comprises of the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketub. Okay, so that's the core book in Judaism. In Islam, of course, the core book is called the Quran. Okay, now in terms of the prophets, right? For Judaism, the main prophet is Moses or Musa, right? Whereas in Islam, remember, Islam does recognize all of the other prophets as well, but it recognizes Prophet Muhammad as the last prophet. Okay, just in terms of timeline, Judaism is the oldest, then comes Christianity, and then comes Islam. Okay, that's in terms of the timeline. So Judaism starts in 6th century BCE, whereas Islam starts in 610 AD or Common Era. Okay, so that's just to give you a wide background of the two religions mainly at play. Of course, Christians also live in the region which is Israel and Palestine, and have also, of course, suffered due to the instability in that region. Now, moving on, one of the core places, okay, let me first show you the image. One of the core places in the city of Jerusalem, which is at the center of the dispute between Islam as well as Judaism. This is the Al-Aqsa compound. Okay, so let me take you back. Basically, this compound is either called Al-Aqsa compound or Temple Mount, right? So in Judaism, it is called Temple Mount. In Islam, it is called the Al-Aqsa compound or the Haram al-Sharif. Okay. Now, why is this particular compound significant both for Jews as well as Muslims? So when it comes to the Jews, okay, it is considered the site of the first temple in Judaism as well as the second temple in Judaism. Okay, and therefore this place is considered the holiest site in Judaism. Okay, now long ago, the second temple was actually demolished by the Romans. Okay, now coming to the Muslims, this place, what is today at the Al-Aqsa compound or at Temple Mount, it is the Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, also known as the farthest mosque. Okay, this is considered the third holiest site in Islam. Okay, so keep that in mind. Holiest in Judaism, third holiest in Islam. Okay, so what in terms of the Islamic buildings there, mainly it is the Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa as well as the Dome of the Rock. Okay, now in this compound, a part of it is called the Western Wall. Okay, which is the site of or which is the place where Jews still pray to this day. Now, this wall is considered a remnant of the second temple of Judaism. Okay, so within this Western Wall, one portion is called the Wailing Wall or the Kotel. Okay, so Jews still worship at this Western Wall. Now, let's have a look at the compound so you'll be able to have a better look. As I said, one of the core buildings is the Dome of the Rock, which you can see here. Other than that, what is marked here as the Qibli Mosque, that's also the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And here you can see the Western Wall, also marked as the Al-Buraq Wall. Okay, part of this is also called the Wailing Wall. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. Okay, so I just wanted to acquaint you. We've had a look already at the sort of religious background. We've also seen one of these core sites in the city of Jerusalem, which is the holiest in Judaism and the third holiest in Islam. Okay, let's now come to the next. Now, Zionism is a movement which takes root, as you can see, in the late 1800s, near the very end of the 1800s. So if you are asked, what is Zionism? So I've given you a definition of Zionism here. So it's described as an ethno-cultural and nationalist movement advocating for the establishment of a national homeland for the Jewish people in the region that is Palestine. Okay, so what is the core of Zionism? The objective is the establishment of a Jewish national home in the place which was already called Palestine. Okay, where does this word come from? Its origin is from Mount Zion. Okay, this is a place described in the Hebrew Bible, and that's the origin of the word Zion. Okay, now this is a movement that takes root in the late 1800s, and in 1897 it sort of culminates in the first Zionist conference, and at this conference the World Zionist Organization is also established. Now, who is considered the founder of this organization and one of the leading lights of the Zionist movement? His name was Theodore Herzl. Okay, now just to give you a bit of background, there is a word you will encounter here. It's called aliyah. Okay, so this is a word used to indicate the waves of Jewish immigration into the region now called Palestine. Okay, so the first big wave happened from the 1880s till the early 1900s, and the second big wave happens from the early 1900s till the beginning of the First World War. As you'll realize, of course, especially due to persecution of Jews, mostly at the hands of Nazi Germany, but also at the hands of other countries and communities, more and more immigration took place into Palestine of the Jewish community. Okay, so just keep in mind this word, the aliyah. You should know what is the meaning of Zionism, and the sort of defining moment is the first Zionist conference and the creation of the World Zionist Organization by Theodore Herzl. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. Now, let's come to the next portion. This details all of the early agreements and declarations which took place. Now, all of these you can see are around the First World War. Okay, so this is kind of the beginning of great power politics in and around the First World War. As you'll see once Pam discusses it, the big powers essentially were playing both sides, with their core objective being their victory in the First World War. Okay, so let's have a look.
All right. Now, before we get into these respective agreements, one thing that you have to keep in mind that right now this entire West Asian region was actually colonized by the British, either by the British or the French people. All right, and the core interest of these Western European countries in this region will always till today be oil. All right. Okay. Now the first agreement here, it came in 1915-16, and this is known as Hussein McMahon. Now this McMahon person is the same McMahon person who also brokered the 1914 Shimla Conference in India, which demarcated the northeastern international boundary of India between Arunachal Pradesh and China. Okay, only the northeastern one, not the Aksai Chin region. All right. Okay, so here 1915-16, the UK promised the Arab leaders that an Arab state would be created here. All right. So in 1915-16, they promised for creation of an Arab state, and no talk for creation of a Jewish state was mentioned. All right. Then in 1916, an agreement was brokered between the French and the British. British was Sykes and Picot was a French leader, and both of them brokered the 1916 agreement, where again they talked about creation of an Arab state in this erstwhile Ottoman Empire divided region. All right. So here again, no mention of creation of Israel or a Jewish state was mentioned. All right. Now here, this agreement was taken between Arab leaders and the British, here between the French and the British. Now here, just 1 year later, the UK unilaterally, without any talks, discussions with other leaders, declared, and this particular declaration is known as the Balfour Declaration, which is the main cause for the entire conflict that ensues now. All right. So 1917, the British made this unilateral declaration saying that they will also back creation of a Jewish state in this already existent Arab state region. All right. So this actually became the major point of contention in post 1970. All right. You want to add something?
Yeah. So just keep in mind. So this is a correspondence. So the Hussein-McMahon correspondence is taking place through letters, and they promised the creation of an Arab state after World War I, once the Allies would win. And why would they do this? Because the Arab leaders would start a revolt against the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so you'll realize, it's sometimes problematic just to see it from the lens of religion, right? From that perspective, the Arab leaders as well as the Ottoman Empire would be following the same religion. So it's not always, perfect to take a religious lens to this. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, remember, happened during the First World War. It's a secret agreement that if we win the war, we are going to create this state, which is going to be essentially Arab, but the British will have control over it, except some parts would be under international administration. Ma'am has already covered the Balfour Declaration, so it's a unilateral announcement. And finally, of course, the Allies won World War I and established the League of Nations. Now, from the perspective of League of Nations, remember, the League of Nations created a system of mandates that the so-called undeveloped, uncivilized peoples of the world are not ready for self-government. And so these advanced nations need to sort of babysit them through the system of self-government. Okay, so the League of Nations established the system of mandates, and as you'll see, after the First World War, the British Mandatory Palestine was created. Okay, so what is British Mandatory Palestine? Basically, the region which is today Palestine. This was created as a Class A mandate for the UK to govern. Okay, so the UK would govern this Class A mandate, which is British Mandatory Palestine. Okay, so it gets established in 1920, but officially the League of Nations issues the Class A mandate to the UK in 1922. Lest you think this is a relic of the past, it continued well into the 60s and 70s. Under the UN, the same thing is called the trusteeship system, effectively the same thing. And that's why the sixth organ, which we never hear about, is called the Trusteeship Council. But as you all know, it is now defunct. The last of the territories under trusteeship basically have gone independent, and they are now self-governed. Okay?
The last one was in 1994. Okay, 1994, and the last one was Palau. Okay, since then it has become an inactive organization.
Okay, but bringing it back to mandates under the League of Nations, so British Mandatory Palestine gets created. Now, we are going to skip over large swaths of time, only in the interest of brevity, I guess. Okay, now what you'll realize is Hitler comes to power, Nazi socialism rises from the 30s, right? So here you'll see the persecution of the Jews, the Nuremberg laws, which discriminated against the Jewish population of Germany and other regions under control of Germany. Of course, it was followed by the Holocaust by Nazi Germany. Remember, what does this term Holocaust mean? It is the mass genocide of Jews, as well as various other discriminatory practices, but essentially the mass genocide of Jews by Nazi Germany before and during the Second World War. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, and one more thing, what are the Nuremberg laws? These were essentially racial laws prescribing how to identify if a person is Jewish and what the effects of that would be in the legal sphere. Okay, so all of this begins happening in the 1930s, and basically from 1933, a lot of Jews begin migrating to different regions, right? Migrating out from Germany and the surrounding countries. This, of course, gains steam to the extent that by 1940, more than half of the population in Palestine was Jewish. Remember, we told you in 1900, less than 10% of the population was Jewish, but by this time in 1940, about half of the population in Palestine was Jewish. Okay, now we'll fast forward a few years to the year 1937, when the Peel Commission or the Palestine Royal Commission was set up, primarily by the UK. Okay, so they set it up in 1936, and what did it do? The Peel Commission, remember, is the one which recommends the partition of the British Mandate of Palestine into an Arab state, a Jewish state, and then separate control of Jerusalem. Okay, so this is the origin, right? This is the early origin of the modern two-state solution. Okay, as you all know, the British were good at partitioning countries and certainly relished in it. At any rate, the Peel Commission, almost 10 years before our own partition in India and Pakistan. But anyway, so keep in mind, Peel Commission or the Palestine Royal Commission is the first one to recommend the two-state solution officially. Okay, let's now move on. So if you just take a look at this source, so basically in the 20s, 30s, and even till the 40s, this is what the map looks like. Let me just point out a few things. So after the League of Nations created the mandate, there was the British Mandate of Palestine, right? Here you also see the British Mandate of Transjordan, but it was locally autonomously ruled by their local emir. Let's just have a quick look at the broader map. So we have Syria here. Even today, this is Jordan today. We have Egypt. Okay. Remember, this boundary between West Bank and Jordan is the Jordan River, essentially. Okay. So which river separates Jordan and Israel? It is the Jordan River. Okay. Which sea is it on which the Gaza Strip is located? It is the Mediterranean Sea. What ma'am has drawn here, this is basically what is the modern day Gaza Strip. Okay. So keep in mind, this region here is the West Bank. So this region broadly here, I mean, this is not an exact map, but this region here is the West Bank. This here is the Gaza Strip. West Bank is the western bank of the Jordan River. Okay. And Gaza Strip is on the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. To the south, you have Egypt. On this side, you have Jordan. At the top, you have Syria. There are a few other smaller countries around as well, including Lebanon. We'll see those as we discuss those events. So I just wanted to show you the broad map so you have an idea of the region we are talking about. Okay, so let's now move on to the next. Till this point, we have reached the Peel Commission in 1937. Okay, so since we are going chronologically, the Arab League or the League of Arab States gets established in 1945, originally with 7 members through the Alexandria Protocol. Okay, currently there are 22 members. It is headquartered in Cairo. India, remember, is an observer of the Arab League. Okay, not a member, but an observer since 2007. Palestine, of course, is a full member. And the 2025 summit of this organization took place in Baghdad in Iraq. Okay, so I just wanted to flag this organization for you, because in this entire region, other than Israel, all of these surrounding states and Palestine together broadly are referred to as the Arab nation. Okay, let's now move on to the next. Now we finally reach the 1940s, right? The beginning of the two-state solution, the partition plan by the UN, as well as the creation of Israel. Those are the three events we seek to cover on this slide.
All right. Now, in 1947, around 1947, this entire region was still a mandate of the British. And like things happened in India, we had this entire Hindu-Muslim conflict that was happening, and there were massive riots and killings. The same thing was happening here also. All right. Now, in the beginning of 1900s, we said that around 10% of the population was Jews here. But then because of Hitler rising to power in 1933 and the enabling laws and everything, that resulted in massive exodus of Jews from not only Germany, but the surrounding regions also in Germany, from Europe, into this one safe space. All right. And why did they all come here? Because the British permitted the Jews to come here in large numbers. All right. Initially, the in-migration was around 1,000 Jews per person per year, but then because of Hitler, it rose to around 1 lakh Jews per year. All right, which resulted in a massive demographic upheaval in this particular region. This caused for the British, like they did in India, to withdraw and leave India and Pakistan to their own chaos. The same thing they did here also. Right? They left this violence-ridden region and they gave that entire they left it into the hands of United Nations to take further actions. All right. And as recommended by the Peel Commission in 1937, the UN also intended that this particular region must be bifurcated into two states, one a Palestine, an Arab state, which would be Palestine, and a Jewish state would be Israel. All right. So this came into this was brought into existence on 14th of May 1948, when also Israel also came into existence on 14th of May itself. All right. So UK indicated its intention to end its mandate on 14th of May 1948 and referred the matter to UN. And on the very same day, 14th of May 1948, also the establishment of Israel took place. All right. And this entire partition plan was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 29th of November 1947, which was given effect just a few months after, on 14th of May 1948. On 14th of May, a new country was created here, Israel, which was headed by David Ben-Gurion, who was the then chairman of World Zionist Organization, which was established in 1897. And chairman of the Jewish Agency for Palestine, also the founder of the State of Israel and the first Prime Minister of Israel. All right. Now, this was a one-day-old country, and the very next day, 15th of May, this one-day-old country was attacked by the combined armies of 5 neighboring Arab states.
Before we get into it, just remember the partition plan, which is also called the two-state solution. The date is 29th of November 1947, and this is a reason to this day, 29th of November is observed as the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian peoples. We'll cover this towards the end of our presentation. So this is the date on which the partition plan is adopted by resolution 181-2. Okay. If you want to remember any resolution for this year's CLAT, this is the resolution number you should keep in mind. The UNGA resolution number 181-2 of 1947, adopted on 29th November 1947. What was its proposal? An Arab state, a Jewish state, and an internationally controlled city of Jerusalem. Okay. So this was the plan. The British, as ma'am said, basically abandoned the region. It said, okay, the question is referred to the UN. We will leave on this day. At this point, remember, in India and Pakistan, the British at least left on a day by handing over governance to the governments of India and Pakistan. That is not what happened in this case. The British simply left on the 14th of May 1948. On the same day, David Ben Gurion, head of WZO, head of the Jewish Agency, founder of Israel, first PM of Israel, simply declared the establishment of the state of Israel. This date is significant. You should know this, 14th of May 1948. Okay, so this is a nation which gets created. Now let's come to the next slide. We'll just do a quick.
Just 1 minute. This one particular point here, the international city of this was kept as a mandate under the United Nations. And why was this kept as an international city or as an independent city outside a Jewish or an Arab state? Was only because this particular place is a holy place for all the three religions, right? So this was all the three religions, meaning Judaism, Christianity, as well as Islam. Okay, so as to not to create conflicts among the three religious communities, who should pray here, who should not be allowed to pray here, this was kept as an international independence.
Before we move on, please keep in mind this plan never really gained enforcement. Okay, so it was never officially enforced, and even to this day, you will see that various conferences refer to the objective as the implementation of the two-state solution. Okay, so we've kept a quick slide before we get to the first war. So you can see here the flag of Israel. The star here is called the Star of David. Okay, this is a Jewish symbol. Here you have the picture of Mr. David Ben Gurion, the founder or father of Israel, and this is the emblem of the country. Now, just a few fast facts. Okay, so what's the Parliament of Israel? It is the Knesset. When does Israel get founded? 14th of May 1948. Who was the first prime minister? David Ben Gurion. Who is the current president? Isaac Herzog. Who is the current PM? Controversial PM, Benjamin Netanyahu. What is the capital? Now, this is disputed. Israel says it is Jerusalem. Some countries recognize it, most don't. But Tel Aviv, for a long time, used to be the de facto capital. But under Trump's first term, the US, as a big power player, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. But remember, most countries still do not. Okay, so Israel says its capital is Jerusalem. What is the official language here? Hebrew. What is the national anthem of Israel? It is the Hatikwa. Why we are flagging the anthem? 150 years of Vande Mataram. You can be asked this in relation to that. The Constitution of Israel is basically called Basic Law. If you go back to the 2020 CLAT paper in the GK section, you'll see a reference to the same. Okay. Now, Israel has a state religion, which is Judaism. Okay. And in keeping with that, they have something called the law of return or the right of return. Now, what this says is that any Jewish person in the world living in any country, citizen of any country, has the right to return to Israel, take citizenship and live there. So that is the right of return. You should know what this phrase means. The currency is called shekel. Remember, Israel gets created 14th May 48 and becomes a UN member in 1949. Finally, just as an aside, I have mentioned, of course, the intelligence agency of Israel is called the Mossad. Okay, so let's now come to the first Arab-Israeli war.
Now, this particular war we have specifically mentioned as the first one because we need to okay. So till now we've had 5 wars. The present one that is the fifth. So we will be following in order all the wars that have yeah. All right. Now Israel was created on the 14th of May 1948, and it was a one-day-old state where. And just before this, 14th of May, UN had clearly demarcated the entire region into 2 different states. One was Israel and one was Palestine, right? Okay. And this other religion within or amongst. Alright? One more thing here, just keep in mind that this was attacked by Iraq and not Iran. Alright? We will be covering a small section of Iran and Israel also today. So just keep in mind that all the wars that are going to follow, Iran is not a part of any of them. Alright? Okay. Now, in this particular war, naturally, we don't expect that Israel would at least winning though is still a second this thing, but we didn't even expect that it's going to survive. But not only did Israel survive, but also captured a larger territory than was given to it as per the UN division. Alright. So at the end of the war, Israel had control over 77% of the territory, where previously 60% of the region was Arab region and 40% was that of Israel. Alright. The remainder was controlled by Jordan, West Bank. One part of it we'll show you in the map. One part of it was captured by Jordan because Jordan is also one of the fighting parties. One side of it was, that is the Gaza Strip, was taken over by Egypt, and the remaining was expanded into by Israel. Alright. Now, because Israel captured into a larger region, into Palestine, so a large number of Palestinians they started out migrating from the Israeli captured, right? And this major out migration or exodus of Palestinians came to be known as Nakba, or the Great Catastrophe, right? And ethnic cleansing of Palestinian Arabs, because naturally when it is a war and you are expanding into another religious and then in 1948, after the war, by 1949, they had undertaken the establishment of a green line or armistice, which implies putting down alright, and this was undertaken between Israel and Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, alright, because they were basically the bordering countries. Iraq was a little away. Okay? Alright, now this is the map. Here, this was how it was divided as per the UN partition plan. Alright, the orange part is Palestine or the Arab state, and the green one is Jewish. Now, this division itself is effective. I mean, if you are actually undertaking a redrawing of boundaries, so they don't come in between. But then they have to do it this way because naturally they wanted a war. Alright, but then after the war, this became the entire new geography of the region. This entire region here was occupied by Jordan. Alright, this became a part of Jordan. Here, the Gaza Strip became a part of Egypt. And here, as Sir told you in the beginning itself, you have the Jordan River here. This falls on the west bank of the Jordan River. So this is the west bank. Alright, this is the Jordan River. This is the west bank of the river. This is the, alright. So this is how. So naturally, this particular portion, which was a Palestinian state, it is captured by Israel. So Israel captured a major territory. This entire region here again captured, so expanded more than was given to Israel as per the 1948 division. Okay?
All right. I hope this is absolutely clear. We put up a series of maps throughout this video just to make sure you can visualize all of it. Okay. So this is as per the partition plan. Orange is Palestine. The light green is supposed to be Israeli. Remember, the plan is never actually enforced. It's a piece of paper. Israel declares its creation on 14th of May, 48. On 15th of May, the Arab-Israeli war starts. And at the end of it, this is the situation. Okay. All right. Let's now move on to the next. Now, since we are going chronologically, let's now come to 1949. This is an important agency of the UN, which this is a full name. It stands for UNRWA. Okay. So the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. This is an agency that gets established. The short form is UNRWA, and this gets established in 1949 to be headquartered in Amman, Jordan, and working headquarters in Gaza, Palestine as well. Okay. So obviously after the first Arab-Israeli war, there were a large number of refugees. As ma'am said, there was a Nakba, or the Great Catastrophe, which led to the exodus as well as ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian or Arab population. Okay. This is why today the concentration of the Palestinians is in West Bank and Gaza's Strip. Okay, because those were the regions after the first Arab-Israeli war, which remained under control of Jordan and Egypt. Okay, so due to the Nakba, most of the refugees streamed into the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, due to handle this refugee problem, this organization gets created, which is the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Why is this important for us in this year and for this year's CLAT? That's because in 2024, the Knesset, or the Israeli parliament, banned UNRWA from functioning in the territories of Israel as well as parts of West Bank. Okay. Now, this was passed in 2024, but it took effect in Jan 2025. So in this year, in Jan 2025, the UNRWA has been banned by Israel. This is quite unprecedented. It's a UN agency which has been banned in a UN member state. Okay, so if you think of it from that lens, it is quite a significant event. So what do you need to know? The head of this agency is called the Commissioner General. His name is Philippe Lazzarini. Okay, remember, this is the only special refugee agency of the UN for a particular region. All other refugees in the rest of the world are dealt with by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Right now, that is Filippo Grandi. Okay, so I just wanted to flag this for you because it gets established at this stage. Okay, and link that to this year's news on the banning of this organization by the state of Israel. Okay, let's now move on to the next. This brings us to the second Arab-Israeli war, also known as the Suez Canal crisis.
In the beginning of the session, we told you that this entire Middle East, this has been pretty important for the Western European countries and US in general, because it is an oil-rich region. All right, so because it is an oil-rich region, it is pretty important for the Western European nations. All right, now Egypt was also previously a colony of the United Kingdom, and Egypt had become independent with dominion status in 1922, and then eventually the monarchy of Egypt was abolished in 1952, which resulted in the abolition of the dominion status as well. And here, after 1952, there was a leader which rose to power, and he is by far the most strong leader, nationalist leader that Egypt has seen till now. All right. Now, Abdul Gamal Nasser became the president in 1954. Now, this particular canal here, known as the Suez Canal, it was developed because Egypt was a mandate of the United Kingdom. So the Suez Canal was constructed by the United Kingdom in collaboration with the French. The person who had built this was a French person, and his name was Ferdinand something. And 1969, this canal was built, and now this particular canal is a strategically very, very important canal. Why? Because it shortens the entire travel time from Western Europe to Southeast Asian regions. All right. If you all remember, 1498, Vasco da Gama came to India. So Vasco da Gama had come to India from Portugal via Cape of Good Hope, that is encircling the entire continent of Africa and then reaching India, which is a pretty long route. All right. This particular canal actually shortened this entire distance, and you could straight away enter the Mediterranean Sea, take the canal route and reach the Arabian Sea region. All right. Due to which the canal was strategically very important, Until now, the canal is one of the most expensive canals, all right? The toll taxes are very, very high here. So naturally, the Britishers did not wish to let go of this particular canal. So in 1936 here, Anglo-Egyptian Treaty, by the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty, the British had given independence and everything to UK, to Egypt, but through this particular treaty, they had agreed or they had signed this agreement where they had taken the lease of this particular canal for the next 20 years also till 1956. Okay. Now, 1954, Abdul Gamal Nasser rose to power and he had agreed that in 1956, he is going to renew the terms of this treaty and British control of the Suez Canal will continue. All right. Okay. Now, something happened in between. What happened in between is the establishment of NAM in 1955. Now, NAM, I don't know if you all are aware, but although it is a brainchild of Jawaharlal Nehru, but along with India, there were four other founding countries of NAM. All right, we had India was one of the founding members. Egypt was one of the founding members. We had Yugoslavia, we had Ghana, and we had Indonesia. All right, so we had 5 countries who had founded NAM in 1955. Now, this particular period was a Cold War period. All right, and US had this major problem that if you do, even if you don't take up socialism as your form of government, but you do not take up capitalism or liberalism or the US ideology, then by default you have sided with Russia. All right. Now, Egypt took up a non-aligned stance in 1955, but this was seen by US as taking sides with Russia. All right. Now, why is this significant? Is because in 1954-55, Egypt had an agreement with UK and US to undertake the building up of a dam known as the Aswan Dam. And US had agreed to fund the construction of the Aswan Dam. In 1955, post-NAM, US said that US is not going to undertake construction or funding of the Aswan Dam. This triggered Nasser, and Nasser suspended the renewal of the treaty and nationalized the Suez Canal, meaning now the Suez Canal was an Egyptian controlled canal. Okay. So in 1956, UK, French, they lost all control over the Suez Canal, and naturally they did not wish to let go of this control. So what happened now is, going back to the first war, the 1948 war, Israel was a one-day-old country, but Israel survived the war. Now, do you think is it actually possible for a one-day-old country to survive the combined, and not only survive, but actually win and capture a larger territory against the combined armies of 5 Arab countries? I believe not. All right. Now, why did Israel actually survive? That was because Israel was always supported by US and the British and French. All right. Why did US support Israel war affairs? Efforts or its entire existence was less along religious lines, but more along strategic lines. Why? Because Israel would serve as a major base amidst this oil-rich Arab region. All right. So when in 1956 the nationalization of the Suez Canal happened, then UK, France entered into a secret tripartite alliance with Israel and made Israel undertake a land attack on Egypt, and Anglo-French took a combined naval and air attack on Suez from Port Said. All right. Now, what happened in this war? There were no clear-cut winners in this particular war. They had underestimated the power of and capabilities of Abdul Nasser, who was a pretty strong leader, and he did give a very strong opposition to the combined forces of UK, France, and Israel. All right. So, because there were no clear-cut winners, the war was brought to a standstill, and during the war, Israel had captured Sinai Peninsula and Gaza temporarily, and eventually, because of no clear-cut winners, they had to withdraw their forces. All right. Acha, one more thing that regarding the basic outcome of this war is that there were no clear-cut winners, but it greatly strengthened the image of Nasser as a great hero of Arab nationalism amongst all the Arab Peninsula countries, and it further resulted in isolation of Israel in that region. Okay, so this again is a map here where the blue arrows depict the land attack that was taken by Israel. So this is the entire Sinai Peninsula, which was temporarily captured by Israel. Here, this is the Gaza Strip, which was captured by Israel. Here we have the Port Said, and it is from Port Said that Anglo-French troops had come in to undertake an attack on the Suez Canal region. Okay, and here this picture, he is Abdul Gamal Nasser. Okay, all right. Then moving forward to the next chronological event, which is the establishment of PLO. All right, now till now, from 1948 till 1956, there was actually no significant war that was fought by these Arab countries for the actual existence of Palestine. And no Palestinian Authority was fighting the war. They were only fighting the war to maintain a greater Arab homogeneity in the region. All right. It was in 1964, after around 16 years, that they had actually started taking the cause of Palestine seriously. And this came about through the establishment of the Palestine Liberation Organization. It was established on the 28th of May, 1964. Its founder was Ahmad Sukairi. And here you all can see the symbol, emblem of PLO. And one of the prominent leaders and the key leaders, and one of the most important ones, was Yasser Arafat. He was also the founder of the Fatah Party, the third chair of PLO, chair in the sense the head of PLO. He led PLO from 1968, 69 to 2004. He was the first president of Palestine from 1989 to 2004. This came about after the first Intifada, first chairman of Palestine National Authority, PNA, or also Palestinian Authority from 1994 to 2004, and first non-UN member representative to address the UNGA, General Assembly. Current chairman, Muhammad Abbas, PLA, PNC.
So just keep in mind that the PLA and the PNC are associated bodies of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The PLA is the Palestinian Liberation Army, which is the armed force of the PLO, and the PNC is the Palestinian National Council. This is the legislative body within the Palestine Liberation Organization.
Okay, and India was the first non-Arab country to recognize PLO as the sole legitimate representative of Palestinian people in 1974. All right, now here in 1974, we are only talking about India giving recognition to PLO as a legitimate organization to represent the Palestinian people. We are not recognizing as of now the state of Palestine. All right, only giving recognition to PLO. Then Palestine has been an observer of PLO has been an observer of UNGA since 1975 till 2012. After that, since 2012, Palestine has been given an observer status in the United Nations General Assembly. Originally, PLO was headquartered in Beirut, Lebanon.
Okay, so I hope that the core details of the Palestine Liberation Organization are clear to you. You should know when it was established, 1964, the founder, Ahmad Sukairi. Now, the third chairman was Yasser Arafat. Don't worry, we'll discuss how the state of Palestine comes into being, what is the Fatah Party, what is the Palestinian National Authority, and how it will get created. We'll do all of these things. Please keep in mind the current chairman of PLO, the president of Palestine, the state of Palestine, and the chairman of the Palestinian Authority today. All of these offices are held by Mahmoud Abbas. Okay, so please keep that in mind. We have a later slide describing all of these PLA, PLO, PNC, PLC, PA, PNA. We'll get into all of this a little bit later. Don't be confused by this second last point. Basically, since 2012, instead of PLO as an organization, it is the state of Palestine in its own name that has been made a permanent observer of the UN General Assembly. Now, at the bottom here, we have mentioned it is headquartered originally in Beirut in Lebanon. Nowadays, of course, it functions from the West. Okay. So, why have we mentioned this? Because one of the next events is the Lebanon War. Okay. But before that, let's come to the 6-day War of 1967, also known as the June War or the Third Arab-Israeli War. Okay. Now, you'll see the back and forth. 48, the Arab nations invade Israel or attack Israel. Okay. Then we saw the Second Arab-Israel War, which deals with Egypt. Now, in the third one, Israel again invades Syria, Jordan, as well as Egypt. Okay. All three of these regions, all three of these countries are invaded by Israel as part of the June War or the 6-day War. Now, what is the result? At the end of it, Israel captured these 3 or 4 territories from these various nations. Okay. So from Syria, it captured the Golan Heights. From Egypt, it captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip. And from Jordan, it captured the West Bank. Okay. So at the end of the 6-day War, these are the territorial acquisitions made by Israel. Okay. Just keep in mind that West Bank and Gaza Strip have broadly been under the occupation of Israel right from this time. Okay. And at the, during this war, the UN had passed a resolution, the UNSC resolution 242 in 1967, which is broadly called the Land for Peace resolution, which basically indicated that land should be provided and ultimate realization of the two-state solution is essential for any lasting or permanent peace in the Middle East or in West Asia. Okay, now let's have a quick look at the map.
Just one thing, that why is the war known as the 6-day War? It is known as the 6-day War because it began on 5th of June 1967 and ended on 11th of June 1967. So basically the war lasted for a 6 days. That is why it is known as the 6-day War. All right. And here in the map, you all can see that this was before the war and this is after the war. So here, this region is the Sinai Peninsula. All right. Here, this region is the Gaza Strip. This here is your West Bank. And this here is your Golan Heights. All right. Okay. Now, West Bank was captured by Jordan 1948. Gaza Strip captured by Egypt 1948. All right. After the 6-day War, Israel had occupied the Sinai Peninsula along with the Gaza Strip. Israel had occupied the entire West Bank and Israel had occupied the Golan Heights. All right. Why is this important? Is because this actually sets the prelude to the next war, which happens in 1973. Okay. All right. So the next war in the series is your Yom Kippur War of 1973, which is also the 4th war in the Arab-Israeli war series. Again, why is the war known as the Yom Kippur War? Because the war began, or this attack was undertaken on the festival of, or the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. All right. So Yom Kippur is actually one of the biggest festivals that the Jewish community celebrates. It is known as the Day of Atonement in the Jewish community. And why is this day mostly chosen is because it is a major day of feast and holiday. All right. So all the military forces, armed forces are mostly not on high alert. They're all out feasting. So that is why the day became a pretty easy choice that they could target Israel and defeat it. All right. So in this particular war also, Israel did suffer from initial setbacks, but was very quick to recuperate. All right. Okay. So this particular war began on 6th of October 1973. That year, Yom Kippur fell on 6th of October. All right. It keeps on changing as per the calendar. And here in the last war, Israel had captured Sinai from Egypt and Golan Heights from Syria. So naturally, they are going to undertake this invasion to recapture the territories that they had previously lost. All right. So Egypt recaptured its Sinai Peninsula. Syria recaptured its Golan Heights. Jordan did not make any advancements. So after this war also, that is after 67 itself, Gaza and West Bank remained Israel occupied territory. Okay. No recapture of those regions took place here. Okay, now why is this the fourth war more significant for you all? Is because it is this particular war which has been reiterated exactly 50 years after. All right, on 7th of October 2023, on the same festival of Yom Kippur, the fifth war in the Israel-Arab context took place, but this time it was not the Arab nations that undertook an attack on Israel or any particular invasion, but it was Hamas that undertook an attack on Israel. Okay, so it happened on the very same Yom Kippur festival. That is one relation between the 73 war and the 2023.
So let's have a look at the map just to gain a visual idea. So as you can see here, the Sinai Peninsula gets recaptured by Egypt. So this goes back to Egypt. The Golan Heights gets recaptured by Syria. So this goes back to Syria. The West Bank at this point remains under Israeli occupation, and so does the Gaza Strip. Okay, so this is the current status after the end of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, also known as the October War or the Fourth Arab-Israeli War. Okay, so I hope the map makes it absolutely clear to you. Let's now move on to the next, which is basically 1978. Okay, so this becomes the very first time any of the Arab states reaches a normalization agreement with Israel. Okay, so the Camp David Accords of 1978 take place. By accords because these two frameworks get signed. Who signs them? Anwar Sadat of Egypt and Menachem Begin of Israel. Okay, and this accord or these accords are brokered by the then president of the United States, that is Jimmy Carter. Just remember, Jimmy Carter died at the fag end of 2024. In fact, for his work on these accords, he also received the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, who am I talking about? Jimmy Carter. So what is important here? Egypt becomes the first Arab nation to formally recognize Israel. Okay, so Egypt becomes the first Arab nation to formally recognize the state of Israel. This is very important. So in 78, they do the Camp David Accords, and in 1979, they finally sign the peace treaty. Okay, so just keep this in mind. I've given a picture here just so you can get an idea. Okay, so between the Israeli leader and the Egyptian leader, mediated by President Jimmy Carter of the United States. So that's the Camp David Accord. It's important because it's the first recognition of Israel by an Arab state, that is Egypt. This will be important in context of the modern day Abraham Accords, which led to normalization of Israel with several other Arab and West Asian countries. Let's now move on to the next. So now we reach 1982. As I had flagged for you earlier, initially the PLO or the Palestine Liberation Organization operated from Beirut or Lebanon. Okay, so the PLO was mainly located in Beirut in Lebanon. Now, during this Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982, the siege of Beirut took place, and Beirut was essentially captured by the Israeli Defense Forces, and PLO and all of their fighters and leaders were driven out from Lebanon. Okay, remember, this ultimately this invasion of Lebanon also leads to the emergence of Hezbollah. Okay, Hezbollah, of course, today is a pretty significant player in Lebanese politics, and it has an armed wing called the Jihad Council, and it also has an official political party called the Loyalty to the Resistance Bloc. Okay, so in fact, they hold seats in the parliament of Lebanon. Okay, so remember, Israel invades Lebanon. Why? Because the PLO is based out of this place. What happens? Beirut is essentially captured. PLO is driven out. Hezbollah emerges in Lebanon after this event. Ultimately, there is a ceasefire. Forces are withdrawn. The core objective was either the decimation or driving out of PLO from Lebanon. Okay, so that is why Israel had invaded Lebanon in 1982. Okay, so this is not that significant, but keep in mind, because after the 2023 Gaza War, Israel also attacked Hezbollah in Lebanon. Okay, there are 7 or 8 countries which Israel attacked after the October 7th attack. Okay, so initially it was an invasion of Gaza, but over the course of it, there were attacks on Syria, there were attacks on Iran, on Lebanon, on Yemen, and even in Qatar. Okay, so we'll get to those at the end. Okay, so this is all you need to know. If you want it on the map, Lebanon is the country to the north of Israel on the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, let's now move on. The next event which essentially occurs is 1987. Okay, so keep in mind that there is something called the First Intifada. Intifada basically translates to uprising. Okay, so there is sort of a stalemate in the peace process in terms of realization of rights for the Palestinians, which essentially becomes the breeding ground for the First Intifada. Okay, which lasts broadly from 1987 till the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993. Remember, the Intifadas, of course, were primarily violent, but many iterations of this were also non-violent. Moving on, in the midst of the First Intifada, Hamas is founded. Okay, now what is Hamas? Hamas is basically an abbreviation of Harakat al-Muqawamah al-Islami, okay, which translates to the Islamic Resistance Movement. Okay, so Hamas is simply a short form of this. When does it get founded? On the 10th of December 1987, and the most important founder is Ahmad Yassin. Okay, this also has an armed wing. So in context of the Gaza War, this is absolutely relevant to know that the armed wing of Hamas is called the Al-Qassam Brigades. Okay, so please do keep this in mind. Okay, so the Intifada begins in 1987. In the midst of this, Hamas also gets established. Now, we'll get into how this happened, but which part of Palestine is actually governed by Hamas? It is the Gaza Strip. Okay, so remember earlier on our PLO slide, you saw mention of a party called Fatah. Okay, so remember, Palestine Liberation Organization is an overall organization in which many political parties are members. 2 such parties, one is Fatah, another such party is Hamas. Okay, so please keep this in mind. Due to disputes between these 2 groups, Hamas and Fatah, since 2007, Hamas has been in complete control of Gaza Strip, whereas Fatah is the leader of the Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank. Okay, so just keep that in mind. This will become a little bit clear once we move forward in the video. All right. Now, since the organization is mentioned, I'll just mention right now there is no one chair of or one leader or one head of Hamas. Currently, since 2024, it is led by the Hamas Temporary Committee. Basically stays in Doha in Qatar. So it's a group of, I think, 5 members, including Khalid Mashal. So all of these members together form the Hamas Temporary Committee, Basically, after assassination of their previous leader, Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas Temporary Committee is the one which has been leading the organization. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now, 1987, the first Intifada begins. Hamas is formed. There is increasing violence. So, in a bid to restart the peace process, the Madrid Conference is held in 1991. Now, very interestingly, the Madrid Conference was held in Spain, co-hosted by Spain, the US, and Russia. So, for a while, the peace process in the Middle East was undertaken jointly by the US as well as Russia. Okay, so the Madrid Conference takes place sort of to restart the process, and ultimately the process does get restarted in earnest and leads to the Oslo Accords in 1993 and 1995. Okay, now before we get into the Oslo Accords, we also have the state of Palestine. Now, the state of Palestine gets declared in 1988. Okay, this is something which is important to remember. Now, the Declaration of Independence was written by this famous poet whose name is Mahmoud Darwish, who is also popularly called the national poet of Palestine. Okay, so the Declaration of Independence was written by Mahmoud Darwish and proclaimed by Yasser Arafat. You'll remember that Yasser Arafat was the third president or the third chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So this declaration gets read out and is passed. This declaration gets read out and is passed within the legislature of the PLO, and ultimately a public proclamation is made by Yasser Arafat sitting in Algiers, in Algeria, on the 15th of November 1988. So if the question is, when did the state of Palestine come into existence, the answer will be the 15th of November 1988. Okay, I hope this is absolutely clear. Okay, now the first president, now once they declare the creation of the state of Palestine, of course they elect the first president, who was Yasser Arafat. And currently, what is the leadership? The current president of the state of Palestine is Mahmoud Abbas. So as I said, Mahmoud Abbas, president of state of Palestine, chairman of the Palestine National Authority or PA or PNA, as well as chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization. Okay, now currently the president is Mahmoud Abbas and the current prime minister of Palestine is Mohammad Mustafa. Okay, now even Palestine claims Jerusalem as their capital. In fact, you will see later in the 2000s, when progress was sought to be made, the final sticking point in the peace agreement was what will happen to Jerusalem and Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa, right? Everything else could possibly have been negotiated, but the key sticking point was on Jerusalem. Okay. Administratively, Palestine functions from Ramallah. Okay. Now, the official language, of course, is Arabic, and the anthem is called Fidai. Okay. Even here, the constitution is called Basic Law. The state religion is Islam. Now, remember, I have said it is a UNRWA observer since 2012. Don't again get confused. PLO was already an observer in the UNRWA. That same place was taken by the state of Palestine in the year 2012. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. Let's now move on to the next event, which is the Oslo Accords.
Now, the Oslo Accords actually form the first step of bringing about any sort of agreement between Palestine and Israel. All right, and this also sort of gave formal recognition to the creation of in an independent and coexistent state of Palestine and Israel in that very region. All right. Acha. Now, this particular PLO Oslo Accords there are two segments. One is 93 and the second one is in 95. All right. Both of them are brokered between Israel and Palestine. But the first one actually did not give a very clear-cut transfer of power, that how are they supposed to bring about this transfer of power, which was reiterated in the 95. All right. Another thing that has to be kept in mind here, that again only between Israel and Palestine, because Egypt, the peace was brokered through the Camp David Accords 1978. All right. Okay. So in 1993, PLO recognized State of Israel and State of Israel recognized PLO. So this is actually pretty significant in the sense that both these countries, they've given recognition to each other as the representative of the Palestinian people. Oslo I Accord, also known as Declaration of Principles of Interim Self-Government Arrangements. Why was this necessitated? Because if you all remember, since 1967, the West Bank and the Gaza region has been under Israel control. All right, they do not have a legitimately established Palestinian government. All right, so this was signed between PLO through President of Palestine Yasser Arafat and Israel through Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in Washington DC. This was Washington DC on 13th of September 1993, and this was again brokered by US President Bill Clinton. All right. Now, US brokered this peace. US brokered the 78 peace, and eventually US is going to broker all the peace. All right. For the 78 peace, Jimmy Carter, brokered by Jimmy Carter, and before the Camp David Accords, he also had undertook another treaty known as the Torres-Carter Treaty, for which he had been given the Nobel Peace Prize. The US presidents, they caused the war to happen. Then they try to bring about peace so that they can obviously vouch for the peace prize, as you could see this year also with Donald. Okay, all right. So the aim of the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations within the current Middle East peace process is to establish a Palestinian interim self-government authority, the elected council for the Palestinian people in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. All right. And this was eventually executed by the Gaza-Jericho Agreement of 1994. Now here they only talked about creation of a government in Palestine, but they did not actually propose a plan as to how is this transition going to take place from once an Israel-occupied region to now a self-governing state of Palestine. So to further this, it was done through the Oslo Accords 2 of 1995. All right, so this was just a picture of Rabin and Yasser Arafat with Bill Clinton. Okay, all right. So Oslo Accord 2, known as Interim Government on West Bank and the Gaza Strip, signed between PLO through President of Palestine Yasser Arafat again and the same Israel Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in Washington DC, 28th of September 1995, brokered by US President Bill Clinton. This provided for Palestinian Legislative Council, which was established since 90 and remained in power since 1996 till 2007, where it was taken over by Hamas. Created now this entire region, the Gaza Strip and West Bank, was divided into 3 regions, A, B, C. So West Bank A was to have full Palestinian control. West Bank, the B territory, was to have a combined control of Israel as well as Palestine, and C was to be completely under Israeli control. And then eventually, after 5 years, they are going to transfer power to PLO or Palestine. Then the Oslo process had provided governance arrangements for an interim period of 5 years with the aim of reaching a comprehensive agreement within that time frame. However, this naturally did not occur. Okay.
Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear on the Oslo 1 and 2 Accords. It did attain a degree of progress in that self-governing institutions were created within the occupied Palestinian territories of Gaza Strip as well as West Bank. However, it was roundly criticized on both sides, both within Israel as well as Palestine. That's because on the Palestinian side, the major criticism was that there is no real talk of establishment of a actual state of Palestine, right? The country of Palestine. So where is the question of self-determination? Even this West Bank A, B, and C, the part under total Israeli control was the largest. Okay, and these parts A and B were kind of pockets. They were not even joined together with each other. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Heavily criticized, but important is that out of the Oslo Accords came the creation of the Palestinian Authority, or also known as the Palestinian National Authority, as well as the PLC, or the Palestinian Legislative Council. Okay, this is what is significant. The second significant point is it began with PLO recognizing the existence of the state of Palestine, but on the other hand, Israel only recognized PLO as a representative of the Palestinian people. Remember, Israel did not recognize a state of Palestine under the Oslo process. They simply recognized PLO as a legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. So ultimately, though these new institutions were created, it did not result in a permanent or lasting peace. There was no comprehensive agreement which was reached at the end. And the thing is, though, that these institutions that were created are still going on, even though they were supposed to be interim arrangements. But since no permanent solution was found, these institutions continue to exist. Which institutions do I talk about? The Palestinian National Authority, also known as the Palestinian Authority, as well as the Palestinian Legislative Council, or the PLC. Let's now move on and come to the Camp David Summit and the Second Intifada. Now, as you know, as we just discussed, the Oslo process did not yield a permanent agreement. So there was an attempt to again restart the process or continue the process through the Camp David Summit of the year 2000. By this time, the president of the US was still Bill Clinton. The chairman of the PLO, president of Palestine, was still Yasser Arafat. But from the side of Israel, it was Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Okay, so though the president of the US was still the same, and the PLO chairman Yasser Arafat was still the same, the PM of Israel was now Ehud Barak. Okay, so the Camp David Summit took place in the year 2000 in July. It resulted in a failure, though agreement was supposedly reached on many points. Ultimately, the sticking point was who will have sovereignty over Temple Mount or the Al-Aqsa compound, and who will control the city of Jerusalem. Right? Okay, so this resulted in a complete failure. There was, of course, deep disquiet about this, that again, there is no foreseeable path to the creation of a state of Palestine, and it led to the Second Intifada or uprising from 2000 to the year 2005. Okay, so essentially there were military or violent engagements between the Israeli Defense Forces and the security forces of the Palestinian Authority. It generally is considered to be almost a clear and direct result of the failure of the Camp David Accords and the failure to reach any permanent or lasting peace. Okay, let's now move forward. So on this page, I've given you a full summary of all the Palestinian organizations so that you are not confused. So there's the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. This is the earliest body. Within this, there is the Palestinian National Council. This is the legislature of the PLO. And there is the PLA, the Palestine Liberation Army, which is the armed force of the PLO. Now, this existed. This is the oldest body which exists in the Palestinian movement, the big body. Now, under the Oslo process, the Palestinian National Authority, PA or PNA, to govern West Bank and Gaza gets created. So this is the PA, and under it there is also a legislative body called the PLC, or the Palestinian Legislative Council. Okay, so please be clear on all of this. As of today, the chairman of PLO, the chairman of Palestinian Authority, and the president of the state of Palestine is Mahmoud Abbas. Okay, so let's be absolutely clear about that. The PLC was last constituted in 2006, and there have been no elections since then. We will see this on the next slide. So I hope this gives you clarity on the Palestinian institutions that exist. Let's now move on to the next. This brings us to the Hamas and Fatah conflict. Okay. Now, I previously mentioned that these were two of the foremost, or still are, two of the foremost Palestinian political parties. Okay. For most of the history of the PLO was dominated by the Fatah, right, including Yasser Arafat and even today Mahmoud Abbas. All of them are from the Fatah. Okay. However, at some point, Hamas gets created. Now, in the previous slide, we saw that there is this council called the Palestinian National Council, which is the legislature of the PLO. Now, in 2006, we saw Palestinian National Council, the legislature of the PLO, and the Palestinian Legislative Council, which is the legislature of the PNA. Okay. So in 2006, elections are held to the PLC, or the Palestinian Legislative Council, which is the legislative body of the Palestinian Authority, which governs West Bank and Gaza. In this election, Hamas wins 74 out of 132 seats, whereas Fatah only won 25. Okay, whereas various other parties won the other seats. Okay, now this caused a huge problem within the Palestinian Liberation Organization, as well as in the international community, because while Fatah was still viewed as a legitimate sort of power broker in Palestine, Hamas was condemned by most of the world as a terror organization. So there was a big problem. Even the Fatah party did not want Hamas to become the leaders of the Palestine Liberation Organization or the Palestinian Authority. Okay, so just keep this in mind. Now, they entered into discussions. Can we share power? Can we not? Ultimately, all of these deals broke down, and there were, in fact, violent conflicts between the two parties. Okay, so there was something called the Battle of Gaza, or the Gaza Civil War, in 2007. And after this, what happened is that Hamas took control of Gaza Strip. So from this point on, the West Bank is governed by the Palestinian Authority, which is led by the Fatah party or Mahmoud Abbas, whereas Gaza Strip is governed by Hamas. Okay, so please be absolutely clear. All of the wars, all of the October 7th attack was done by Hamas. And in response, Israel invaded the Gaza Strip. Of course, this later deteriorated into actions by Israel in the West Bank as well. But just keep in mind, Hamas is the one which takes control of Gaza Strip and has been in control since 2007. Okay, and after this year 2006, no further elections have taken place to the Palestinian Legislative Council. Okay, so I hope this clarifies the ground position within the Palestinian political faction. Okay, let's now come to the state of Palestine and a quick discussion on its state of recognition. So, as we said, the state of Palestine was declared in the year 1988. Remember, the PLO existed before this, and many countries had recognized it as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. In that, India was the first non-Arab country. In 1988, the state of Palestine gets created, and India recognizes the state of Palestine in the same year, 1988. Okay? Now, the state of Palestine gets admitted as a permanent observer state in the UNGA in the year 2012. As we flagged earlier, before this, the PLO held this status, but from 2012, it was the state of Palestine which was given this status. Okay, next, as of today, okay, now this is till now December 2025, 157 out of 193 UN countries, as well as Vatican City, recognize the state of Palestine as a fellow country. Okay, so 157 out of 193 of the UN member nations recognize the state of Palestine as a country or a nation. Okay, interestingly, though it is still an observer of the UNGA, the UNESCO treats it as a full member. Okay, so in 2012 itself, UNESCO admitted Palestine as a full member. In fact, this was a big reason that years later, Israel and the US withdrew from UNESCO. Now, another important thing relevant from the perspective of the current war/invasion as well, the International Criminal Court recognizes Palestine as a state, and in fact, Palestine is a state party to the Rome Statute of the ICC. Next, in 2025, all of these countries have recognized the state of Palestine as a country. Okay, so though the future of an actual self-governing independent state of Palestine is very much under a cloud, even so, the year 2025 has been a year where many nations, including many G7 nations, have recognized the state of Palestine. So we have Mexico, Canada, Australia, the UK, Portugal, France, Monaco, Luxembourg, Malta, Andorra, and San Marino. All of these countries recognized Palestine in 2025. As of now, what is the status? 4 out of 5 P5 members, basically all except USA, recognize the state of Palestine, and 3 G7 nations recognize the state of Palestine. Okay, the first G7 nation to recognize the state of Palestine was the French Republic, and this news is barely a few months old. Okay, I think in the month of September. All right, so this is the current status of the recognition of the state of Palestine. Okay, let's now move forward. Yes, now we have the normalization of relations with the state of Israel, and this is linked with the new modern topic of the Abraham Accords. We've already seen the history. Egypt was the first Arab nation to recognize the state of Israel and to normalize relations through the Camp David Accords of 1979. In 1994, the Wadi Araba Treaty or the Israel-Jordan Peace Treaty normalized relations between Jordan and Israel. After this, the first thing to happen is the Abraham Accords, which happened in the year 2020, brokered by the president of the US, Donald Trump. This is in his first term, 17 to 21. Okay, so in the year 2020, the Abraham Accords get signed first between Israel and UAE and Bahrain. So they issued something called the Abraham Accords Declaration, signed by US, Israel, UAE, and Bahrain. Okay, that was the original declaration. Why Abraham Accords? We told you many characters are similar in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and Abraham or Ibrahim is one of those key central figures. This is why we also call these 3 religions the Abrahamic religion. So in 2020, Bahrain, UAE, Sudan, and Morocco, all 4 signed the Abraham Accords, recognized the state of Israel, and normalized relations. The latest news on this, though with Donald Trump, we must always be careful. The latest news announced by the US and Donald Trump is that the state of Kazakhstan is also about to sign the Abraham Accords. Okay, So this is a very recent announcement in the last couple of months. So just keep this in mind. Now, many scholars suggest that the Abraham Accords, far away from helping the situation, also laid the groundwork for sort of escalations in the region, because without any discussion with the state of Palestine, these Arab nations normalize relations with the state of Israel. Okay, so that deals with the status of Arab normalization with Israel. The latest event in this is, of course, the Abraham Accord. So this is a picture from the original Abraham Accords declaration. So that's Trump, Netanyahu, UAE, and Bahrain. Now let's finally come to the Gaza War of 2023. This is called the Gaza War, or the Fifth War, or the Iron Swords War, or the War of Redemption.
Okay. Now, why you need to remember that it is the fifth war, because it is, I think, a CLAT question only, just 1 or 2 years back, that they did ask that what is the series of this particular war. So it is the fifth war in the series. Another connection that was drawn in the same paper of CLAT was this particular war is a reiteration of which of the previous wars. All right. So the 1973 war started on the day of Yom Kippur, and this particular attack also by Hamas on Israel was undertaken on the very festival of Yom Kippur, exactly 50 years later. Okay, so this is a direct reiteration of the last or the fourth war in the series. All right, so that year the festival fell on 6th of October. This year it was on 7th of 2023. It was on 7th of October, and the attack was undertaken by Israel. It was a Hamas. It was an offensive attack by Hamas, and then in defensive, Israel undertook not only a defensive attack on Hamas, but also on other various countries. Okay, so invasion of Gaza began by Israel from 27th of October 2023, and then various ceasefires have been brokered since. All right. Since 2023, we've had various ceasefires and peace agreements and sort of bringing the war to a standstill. But the latest one being the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit, which also could not bring about peace in the region. And just 1 or 2 days later, there were certain instances of counter-attacks beginning in the region. All right. Okay. So temporary ceasefire in November 2023 was brought in. Ceasefire in January 2025 was also brought in. Then under Trump, recently Trump had given his 20-point peace plan in October 2025, which was actually negotiated during the UN General Assembly session in New York, where the Israeli leader had also gone. And here the Iron Swords War that is mentioned, it was also considered as Israel's retaliatory attack on Hamas. All right. So that retaliatory attack is considered as Operation Iron Sword that Israel launched on Hamas. Okay. Then when this particular war took place, and it is because of this particular operation that the war becomes even more relevant for your exam, is Operation Ajay. So in 2023, India undertook Operation Ajay not to participate in the war, but only to evacuate Indians from Israel, all right, during the Gaza war. And the operation has not ended till now. The operation still continues and still becomes a relevant topic. Okay, and other than that, there were other attacks also undertaken by Israel on Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Tunisia, Iran, Qatar.
All right. So now we've given you a broad idea of this war. You'll see that at the bottom here, we have, of course, mentioned the humanitarian crisis, genocide, and famine. Of course, we could do our whole video about those things. Considering the nature of the exam, we of course have to focus on the top events which have taken place. So October 7th, Hamas attacks various places in Israel. It rhymes with the Yom Kippur War. It's exactly 50 years after. The various ceasefires ma'am has mentioned, almost each one has been a failure. The latest ceasefire is a very tentative, tenuous one. Supposedly on paper, it is still holding, but there are major attacks, especially from the side of Israel, on various places in the Gaza Strip. In fact, through the course of the war, even though Hamas only controlled the Gaza Strip, there were even attacks on places in the West Bank. Not just that, through the course of these events over the last 2 years, there have been attacks on Lebanon, on Syria, in Yemen, in Tunisia, in Iran, as well as in Qatar. Okay, the ones on Iran we will cover in more detail. On this slide, I want to cover the one on Qatar. Okay, so in Qatar, now you'll remember when we discussed Hamas, I told you that right now the temporary leadership of Hamas is located in Qatar, in the city of Doha. Now, Israel tried to attack the temporary committee, which is the leadership of Hamas, this year in an operation called Atzeret Hadin, or the Day of Judgment, or the Summit of Fire. It has been reported that this attack was unsuccessful. It caused huge problems because Qatar is one of the chief mediators between Israel, the US, as well as Hamas. Okay, and in fact, in a rare occasion, it even led to the US condemning this attack, which generally does not happen when it comes to the state of Israel. Okay, so through the course of this war, all of these various attacks have happened from Israel towards these other countries. Obviously, it led to a huge humanitarian crisis. There are countless incidents of war crimes, of crimes against humanity, of the crime of genocide as well. We'll cover these terms a little bit later in the slides. There was a huge blockade. There was prevention of the flow of aid into the Gaza Strip. It led to what many call famine in the Gaza Strip as well. So it was, of course, a huge humanitarian crisis. Okay, so please keep all of this in mind. We'll cover some of the other details in the next few slides. Okay, one legal point I want to flag for you. It is the difference between humanitarian law and human rights law. When we talk about humanitarian law, we are talking about the law of armed conflict. When we talk about human rights law, that is when we talk about the civil, political, economic, social rights that people have. Okay, so this basic distinction I would want you to keep in mind. Let's now come to the next one. This is the Israel-Iran war, which happened this year, also popularly known as the 12-day.
Okay, now because of this particular war, the Iran-Israel war, and then India again launching an operation, an evacuation operation known as Operation Sindhu, the entire Israel-Palestine has become even more relevant and important, and a probable question for this year's exam. Okay, all right. Now, during the 12-day war, there were various operations that were launched, which form a part of your current affairs. So, Israel undertook an operation on Iran, and all attacks, mostly on the part of US and Israel on Iran, took place because of the growing uranium enrichment that Iran is undertaking. All right. So all these attacks were only undertaken to destroy the uranium bases in the uranium enrichment bases or the nuclear facilities of Iran. So Israel undertook an operation on Iran known as Operation Rising Lion. US and Israel undertook a combined operation on Iran known as Operation Midnight Hammer. Iran retaliated against Israel with Operation True Promise 3. And not only this, Iran also undertook destruction of certain military bases that US operated from Qatar. and this was termed as Bashar al-Fateh, or glad tidings of victory by Iran. All right. And what was that particular base? It was Al-Usaid Air Base in Qatar, which was jointly or cooperated with Qatar by Qatar and USA. All right. And then amidst all of this, India launched its own rescue operations to bring back Indians stranded in Iran, and that was Operation Sindhu. And not only did we bring back Indians through this operation, we also brought back Nepalese as well as Sri Lankan citizens from Iran. Okay. Now, quickly looking into the background of the Iran-Israel war, or this entire culmination of this present crisis. Okay. All right. Now, I told you all to keep one thing in mind, that along the entire chronology of all the wars that took place, Iran did not participate in any of the wars till the fourth Arab-Israel War of Yom Kippur, all right, of 1973. Now, why did this not happen? Is because Iran was an ally of the United States. And I told you all that Israel has been able to maintain this strong footing. Now Israel is good self-sufficient, but a one-day-old state was successful because it did not have, because it had this massive support of Western European countries, specifically UK, France, and which was further backed by USA. So Israel has always been a major important region for USA in this Arab region. All right. Okay. So before or after Israel, there was one state, which was one country here, which was Iran, which had pretty close relations with the USA. All right. And this begins from 1954. All right. So in 1954, an agreement was brokered between USA and the then monarch of Iran, Shah Reza Pahlavi III. All right. Shah Reza Pahlavi and the USA had this agreement known as the Consortium Agreement. Now, what probably could be the major source of interest of USA in Iran is naturally oil. Okay. So, what was this Consortium Agreement actually about? Under the Consortium Agreement, the monarch or the Shah of Iran had permitted USA to exploit the oil reserves of Iran, extract oil, and export that oil elsewhere, different countries. And in return for this, USA is going to pay a royalty fee to the Shah of Iran. All right. Now, this agreement was brokered with the monarchy and not with the general public, naturally. So, the major beneficiary of the consortium agreement was actually the monarchy or the Shah of Iran, which resulted in massive corruption, massive poverty, and also stark instances of unemployment in Iran. All right. Now, and also under the influence of US, the Shah of Iran had undertaken too much of westernization and secularization of Iran, which did not go down well with the general Islamic population. All right. So in 1979, the people of Iran, they united under the leadership of a ruler or a leader, Ruhollah Khomeini. All right. Ruhollah Khomeini later was given the title of Ayatollah, which translates to the supreme leader. And he led the Iranian Revolution in 1979, which resulted in the of the monarchy and establishment of a theocratic state of Iran, which was Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. And it was from here that the relations between US and Iran, they started going downhill. All right. Now, initially things were fine. US was not that bothered, but eventually Iran saw the discovery of uranium reserves within its territory. And this resulted in undertaking uranium enrichment, and uranium naturally forms the basis for developing nuclear bombs. All right. This posed a major threat to US. Now, before developing these uranium reserves, etc., there are one organization and one treaty that comes into picture here. One is International Atomic Energy Agency, established in 1957, headquartered in Vienna, Austria. And this particular organization is like the umbrella organization that monitors and keeps a check on each and every countries. It has around 180 members, and it keeps a check on all of these countries and their nuclear developments and facilities. Naturally, keeps a tab in facilities also. Then we had this treaty, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was brought into existence in 1968. And this particular treaty gave a definition for nuclear weapon states and said that all those countries who possessed nuclear weapons as of 1st of January 1967 are recognized as nuclear weapon states. Post 1967, basically nobody was permitted to develop nuclear weapons. Nobody in the sense, the countries who signed the NPT. Iran signed the NPT in 1968 because the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979, still under the US influence. India is not a signatory to NPT. Pakistan is not a signatory to NPT. Israel is not a signatory. North Korea was once a signatory, withdrew in 2003, and South Sudan was established only in 2011. It is also not a signatory to NPT. All right. Post the Iranian Revolution, Iran undertook enrichment of its uranium reserves, and a yearly report is submitted by International Atomic Energy Agency to the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly with respect to uranium enrichment, nuclear facilities, arsenals of different countries. All right. Okay. After 1979, also it resulted in the establishment of a diarchical rule in Iran. Diarchical meaning rule of two. One is led by the supreme leader, who is also the commander-in-chief of the army, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He is the second one as of now, established after the 1979 revolution. 1979 resulted in the establishment of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. All right, and this particular organization is for the protection of the Ayatollah. And the second in the diarchical system, the second ruler is the president, who right now is Masood Pezeshkian. All right. Okay. 2015, USA brokered the Joint Comprehensive Program of Action under JCPOA, which was brokered in 2015 by P5+1. So P5, the permanent members of United Nations Security Council, +1 being Germany. Also one of the parties was the EU, European Union. All right. Under JCPOA, there were certain clauses which were imposed on Iran, which are like Iran could only enrich its uranium reserves up to 3.67%, limit its uranium stockpile to 300 kgs, reduce the number of centrifuges by 2/3. This was what was implemented on, what was put on Iran through JCPOA in 2015. 2018, Trump denounced the agreement as a bad deal. 2025, International Atomic Energy Agency submitted a report to the Security Council saying that Iran has enriched its uranium stockpile or uranium up to 60%, which is enough to manufacture 9 nuclear bombs, which served as a very easy target point by USA, and USA undertook this entire massive attack along with Israel on Iran to destroy the nuclear facilities of Iran, specifically 3 sites: Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan, and in Iran. All right. And in that particular series of, and that resulted in the 12-day war of 2025, and also culminated into the series of various operations that were undertaken in this 12-day war. Okay.
What is interesting is that it was the US which withdrew from the 2018 agreement, from the 2015 JCPOA in 2018. Till this point, the IAEA's reports were clear that Iran was following the deal. What was Iran going to get by doing this? The lifting of all of the sanctions imposed by Western countries. Okay. And after the US withdrew, the rest is history, I guess. Let's now move on to the next. I feel like we have been taking this class for a while. We've been following some of your comments as well. So don't worry, we are very near the end of this class. Now, when it comes to this year's news and the sort of tentative recent ceasefire in the invasion of Gaza by Israel, we had the high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution. Quite a mouthful, but remember it was held in July 2025 and later again happened in September 2025. It was co-chaired by two countries, Saudi Arabia and France. What did it adopt? It adopted the New York Declaration in July, which later was endorsed by the UN General Assembly in September. So the UNGA endorsed the New York Declaration, which laid out a stepwise plan of action on how to proceed forward with the peace process to attain security for Israel, as well as the creation of a state of Palestine. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. The next slide is simply an image of the vote totals on this resolution on the question whether to endorse the New York Declaration. What is significant here? Of course, US and Israel voted no, we will not endorse the New York Declaration. Another significant point, India voted yes. Okay, so that is important to keep in mind. In total, almost all of the countries of the world voted to endorse this resolution. It was passed, and very few countries in the low two digits said no or abstain. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. Let's now move on to the next. So after all of this, Trump and Netanyahu proposed the Gaza peace plan. Of course, it's called the Trump peace plan or the 20-point peace plan. It has a lot of terms about ceasefire, humanitarian aid, demilitarization, disarmament of Hamas, security measures in the future, what will be the governance like. There's supposed to be a board of peace which will be led by Trump. It's somewhat crazy, but this is what he proposed. Hamas indicated openness to some of the measures, though not all, because this 20-point plan made very cursory reference to whether a Palestinian state would actually be created. And that is actually the end goal, not only of Hamas, but also of the other Palestinian organizations and political parties. And this is a view supported by almost all of the world. We just saw more than 155 countries of the world recognize the state of Palestine. So under the 20-point plan, a preliminary ceasefire went into effect, which has been broken several times, primarily by the state of Israel. After this, there was a peace summit that was held called the Gaza Peace Summit, which took place in the city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Who hosted the summit? Co-hosted by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt and President Donald Trump of the US. India attended, but through a junior minister, and neither Palestine nor Israel were part of this summit. Okay. At the end of this summit, all of the 30 participants did not release a declaration. There was a declaration by 4 countries only called the Trump Declaration on Enduring Peace and Prosperity by Egypt, USA, Qatar, and Turkey. So that basically brings us to a close of our discussion on the war. We have a few final slides, one on India, Israel, and Palestine. So please note that India recognized the state of Israel in 1950. India was the first non-Arab country to recognize PLO as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people in 1974, and India recognized the state of Palestine in 1988, the year in which the state of Palestine was declared. Interestingly, the first ever presidential visit from India was Pranab Mukherjee in 2015 to both the countries. The first prime ministerial visit was Narendra Modi in 2018 to both the countries. Okay, two sort of not really organizations, but two programs or schemes you have to keep in mind. One is the IMEEC, or the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, launched in 2023. And the second is I2U2, or India, Israel, UAE, USA, launched in 2022, also known as the Mini Quad. Just keep in mind that India and Israel have heavy defense cooperation, including the supply of Barak 8, Spider, and Spike from Israel to India. I put a question mark at the bottom because it is widely understood that the NSO group of Israel has also supplied the surveillance system Pegasus to India, though of course this is not confirmed either by India or by Israel or by the NSO group. So those are the things you should keep in mind. I have pictured some of the stamps here, one related to the Palestinians and one related to the Israelis from the India Post. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. Let's now move on to the next. This simply shows you broadly what the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor is. Let's now move on to the next. This slide essentially mentions terminology or Shabdavali that is important relating to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, first, we've simply mentioned Middle East and West Asia. Middle East is more of a colonial construct, whereas the more modern and neutral term to use is, of course, West Asia. Okay. Aliyah, Holocaust, and Zionism we have covered in the initial few slides. Intifada and Nakba also we have covered. Let's now come to the last 2 points. These are important to remember. Now, genocide we are going to cover in detail in the next 2 slides. But essentially, genocide is the destruction in whole or in part of a national, racial, ethnical, or religious group. What are war crimes? War crimes are violations of international humanitarian law or violations of the law of armed conflict. Okay. Next, crimes against humanity. This is when in the course of an armed conflict, civilians and civilian infrastructure is targeted. That is called crimes against humanity. We've seen the word ethnic cleansing, which is the forced or mass exodus or displacement of a certain population from their natural homeland. Okay. Next, we have the term apartheid, originally used in case of South Africa for racial segregation, discrimination between white and black people. But this is also a term used in context of Israel and Palestine, mainly to indicate Israeli practices against the Palestinians. Finally, we have the word unlawful occupation or occupation. Basically, the position of international law, well accepted and endorsed by the International Court of Justice, is that Israel is currently an occupying power over the state of Palestine. And in fact, the ICJ has gone on to call it an unlawful occupation. Okay, we'll see that in a few minutes. Finally, we have the word Israeli settlements or settlers. So what you should know about this, basically Israel has had a long-standing policy of encouraging its own Jewish citizens to settle in areas which should otherwise be Palestine. Okay, so that's the idea of settlement. In fact, under international law, this is also illegal because an occupying power cannot make attempts to or actually change the demographic composition of the territories it is occupying. Now, finally, just a quick one on the legal cases. Now, one of the initial cases in the ICJ relating to this issue, this related to the construction of a wall in the occupied Palestinian territory. We don't have to go into it too much. This second one is very important This was a case referred by the UN General Assembly, and the ICJ issued its opinion in 2024. The case is called Legal Consequences Arising from the Policies and Practices of Israel in the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem. This was a very important case. In this, the International Court of Justice clearly stated that Israel's occupation was illegal. It was an illegal occupation since 1967 from the Arab-Israeli wars, the third Arab-Israeli war. Okay. Second, the whole practice of settlements is illegal under international law. Third, the court said Israel needs to pay reparations to the Palestinian people. And finally, it said that Israeli practices against the Palestinians amounted to the crime of apartheid as well. Okay. Next, we have the ICC investigation in Palestine. Remember, we told you that Palestine is recognized by the ICC as a state and is a state party. And due to that, the International Criminal Court conducts investigations in Palestine. There has been no final conclusion, but last year in 2024, the ICC issued arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu, the PM of Israel, Yoav Gallant, the Minister of Defense, and Mohammad Daif from Hamas. Since then, Israel has killed or assassinated Mohammad Daif. So as of now, there are outstanding ICC warrants against Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. Okay. Finally, there is a final pending case in the ICJ on the question of whether Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine or not. What is important to remember is that South Africa is the country that brought this case. Okay, this is a case that is currently pending. This finally brings us to genocide. Now, remember, who is it that coined the word genocide? It is Raphael Lemkin. You have to know the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity for the victims of the crime of genocide and for the prevention of that crime. That is the 9th of December. And this is the 10th anniversary of this day being observed. Okay. Remember, the Genocide Convention was adopted in 1948. These last points are very important. A few years back in 2021, the UN Human Rights Council had established the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. This commission comprised till very recently of Navi Pillai as the chair, Milun Kothari from India, and Chris Sidoti from Australia. This commission found in a report that Israel is responsible for the commission of genocide in Gaza. So this is very important. This report finding genocide in Gaza is from 2025. The latest news on this is that an Indian judge has been appointed as the chair of this commission just a few weeks back. That is Justice S. Muralidhar. Okay, he's an exceptional judge. Now, so that covers the basics on genocide. The definition we've already seen. Okay, the Genocide Convention was the first time genocide as an international crime was codified. Just 2 days after your exam is the observance of this international day. The slogan or motto this year is remember the victims and prevent genocide. Finally, very important, we could also take this as a moment to express our own solidarity as well. On the 29th of November, a few days back, was the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. So this is a day that has been established in 1977. Why this 29th of November? Because this is the day on which the UNRWA had adopted the partition plan. Okay, so please keep that in mind. I would say this is very important. If this topic does come up in the exam, this could be an easy and direct question, very close to your exam as well, just a week before or 8 days before your exam. So please keep this day in mind. The last point I've mentioned here is the chair of the UN Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People right now is Koli Sek from the country of Senegal. So that brings us to a close of our discussion today. We have, of course, covered the long and excruciating history of Israel and Palestine, the Zionist movement,
the 5 comprehensive wars, the current war, the peace agreements between various Arab nations and Israel, the recognitions that were given to Palestine, the most important authorities of Palestine, the basic structure of both the countries, and also genocide and the entire issue of genocide, various terms associated with it, and the conventions related to genocide. All right. So it was a pretty comprehensive class that we took today. And this basically covers everything that could probably come as a question in your exam. And this is everything that you have to follow, learn, revise, and redo again and again. All right? Okay. So wishing you all the very best for your exam on 7th. This becomes a probable question. So revise it again and again. Okay?
I think that brings us to a close of our possibly our final last lap revision video. It's been a pleasure to train all of you, to take all of these classes for you, and most of all to make it available to all the aspirants on YouTube. So it's been our pleasure to do that. Do subscribe to our channel if you want to see more such videos. There's a complete playlist of our last lap revision. So if you want a quick comprehensive summary of the GK and current affairs of this year, please go to that playlist and watch the other videos. It features ma'am, Mr. Satyam Sahai, our founder, as well as myself. So it's been lovely to see you this evening. Thank you all for attending. Good night and bye-bye.
Thank you.